Hello, BookTube, and welcome to another weekly reading vlog. Well, once again, I'm filming this late. It's about midnight over here. I've been up since 6 a.m. Yeah, it's just been one of those days. As it's recently, Sunday's not been the best day to do these videos. Sunday is a day when I'm a little bit busier at work than usual, working on Sundays, and it was one of those nights where I just had trouble getting the kids to bed. I don't know if I should switch up my schedule or not, but yeah, for the moment, I'm keeping these videos on Sundays just because that's what I've been doing. Yeah, despite the fact that Sundays are busy, I'm feeling tired. Hopefully, it's not too visible in my face. But it will, it will mean hopefully I don't get too sleep deprived and incoherent on this video. I'll try and work through these quickly. These are the books I've been reading this week. First few I can knock off very quickly. So, of these books, I regret to say I made very little progress on the complete stories of Oz, Glinda of Oz. Actually, just a couple pages, which I actually just read shortly before turning on this video camera. The reason is, the primary reason is, these books I keep with me in my bag, which I take with me to work. This book I've deemed too big to lug around, so it stays at home. I started reading this book during the lockdown, but now that I'm up and about again, going to work every day, it's not so convenient to read this book. So, yeah, just read a couple pages. That being said, I say this every week. I have wasted time this week on YouTube, on Twitter, stuff like that, at time at home. So if I can refocus some of that time, maybe I'll be able to make progress on this book. Wayfarer Redemption, I've read a bit of this. How much have I read? I was on page 154 last week, so I got about 30 pages read of this. I don't have a lot intelligent to say about it without kind of getting into the plot specifics. In fact, the impression I've had this week is the impression I've had for the last several weeks. The narration style is very readable. I find it easygoing. The plot is interesting, but the characters seem a bit static. I know that's the same thing I said last week, but that was my impression this week as well. Teaching reading skills. I was on a page 40 last week. I read up to page 62 this week, so 22 pages. Knocked out a couple chapters here. Yeah, I said last week that I was finding a lot of this repeat from other books I've read in the past. Now, to be fair, I'm coming to this a little bit late in my career, so I've read a few books on the subject. This week as well, I felt a tremendous sense of deja vu reading some of these recommendations. It reminded me of a book by ISP Nation, something like Teaching Reading and Writing, something like that, which had some of the exact same activity ideas that are in this book. Also, From Reading to Reading Teacher, another book I've read a few years ago, again, very similar ideas. There was one part of this book I really liked, which was on page 41, right before going into the reading skills and strategies section. She talks about the problem of credibility. And she said it's very difficult to get the students on board when teaching them a reading skill unless they've noticed that the skill is lacking. Otherwise, she says, you're just not going to have the students aren't going to be interested in learning that reading skill. And I thought to myself, that is so true. I don't know how many times over the years when I've been teaching English that I've taught a reading skill just because it happened to be in the curriculum for that day, or just because it was in the textbook, and have the students totally not interested in the class. Um, and yeah, she says if the students are getting by fine without teaching them a specific skill, then great, don't bother teaching them that skill. She says only teach them the skills when they notice a problem. And I thought that was really good advice. The next couple chapters, though, I didn't like as much. Efficient reading had things about using summaries, subheadings, using the pictures and figures in the text effectively. And it all just seemed like common sense that didn't need to be taught to students. Now, she does say here, like every reading strategy book says, some people just don't have good reading skills even in their L1. Some people who have good reading skills in their L1, it doesn't transfer into their L2. Every book on reading skills will have those justifications. But I thought to myself, headings and subheadings, that's just common sense, right? Paying attention to the headings and subheadings. The figures, and by figures here she means like the graphics or the pictures or the tables and the charts. Okay, tables and charts maybe, but to the extent that figure means like an illustration in the text, I just don't really see the point in spending any time on that. And then we get to reading speed and all these strategies to increase reading speed. Here is where I'm feeling like this is the exact same thing I read in ISP Nation's book years ago. And I was resistant to it at the time I read it from ISP Nation. That all these, the only way to really increase reading speed is just more reading practice. I thought all this focus, all these timed reading practices, or this little card that you make where the students will drop it down over the text to try and increase their reading speed. I thought, that's just a distraction. And certainly for me, if I know I'm doing a timed reading practice, I'm not going to focus on anything I'm reading because I'm going to be so focused on getting my reading speed up that it's just going to it's going to distract me, and I'm going to get flustered when I'm trying to read quicker, and I'm going to lose the comprehension. I suspect a lot of students might be like that. So I didn't feel like I got a lot of good ideas from this week's chapter. But, still several chapters to go. We'll see how this book ends up. And then last, but certainly not least, the Iliad. I am really glad I'm rereading the Iliad. I don't want to say I'd forgotten how great it was, because I don't think I forgot really, but I certainly didn't remember all of it from my teenage days, which was the last time I read this. So chapters this week. I think from this week I read chapter 19. So Achilles gets reconciled with Agamemnon. And then from chapter 20, he goes out and he is looking for revenge on the Trojans. This is after Patroclus has been killed. And I remember from last time reading this as a teenager, that was a very brutal chapter. He was just mercilessly killing Trojans. And the narrator really does not spare you here. He makes you feel sorry for the Trojans. Describes them begging Achilles for mercy, and Achilles not showing any mercy. At the same time, even you hate Achilles reading these chapters. He just seems like a brutal, merciless killer. But at the same time, just the fact that he's so unstoppable as he's just single-handedly decimating the Trojan army, you can't help but feel a little bit of in awe of. And then there's in chapter 20, book 20, Achilles fighting Aeneas. Now, I had completely forgotten about this chapter. Uh, I had remembered Diomedes fighting Aeneas, but I had completely forgotten about Achilles' showdown with Aeneas. Uh, but the interesting thing about Aeneas, of course, is that he later has his own epic, the Aeneid, by Virgil, which was published, I don't know, 8 centuries published, which was written 8 centuries after the Iliad. But yeah, I mean, I think I read the Iliad the first time in 7th grade, and then I read the Aeneid in 9th grade, and then I came back to the Iliad in 11th grade. And when I came back to the Iliad after having read the Aeneid, those sections with Aeneas were of a renewed interest to me. I mean, I knew who he was the first time I read it, just because, it pops up in every survey of Greek and Roman mythology. But after having spent so much time with him in the Aeneid, to come back and see how Homer treats him in the Iliad was interesting. And I've always been a little bit unsure of exactly what the timeline of the mythology surrounding Aeneas was. I don't think in Homer's time Aeneas was the founder of Rome. I mean, I don't think Homer even knew about Rome. But Homer definitely knows he's supposed to survive the Trojan War. I think there was some legend even in Homer's day that he's supposed to take the remnant of the Trojans and become their leader. So, but at the same time, Homer doesn't want Aeneas to beat any of the Greek heroes. So when Aeneas fights Diomedes way back in chapter, what was it, 6 or 7, Aphrodite and Apollo have to save him. When he fights Achilles in book 20, Neptune goes and saves him, which is ironic because Neptune is usually fighting for the Greeks, but I guess Neptune recognizes that Aeneas is not supposed to die here. He's supposed to survive and become the leader of the Trojans. The showdown between Aeneas and Achilles is interesting. They both give each other their speeches. Achilles says to Aeneas, like, "What are you doing fighting for the Trojans? Don't you know King Priam's not going to give you anything?" Because Aeneas isn't actually a Trojan. He's one of the allies of the Trojans. So it's interesting that they have this little fight where there is they exchange these little speeches with each other. And then chapter 21, Achilles ends up fighting the river. Now this is something I do remember from reading the Iliad as a teenager, and I remember being a little bit confused by exactly what I was supposed to be visualizing when I read Achilles fighting against the river. So the idea is the river is just getting upset that Achilles is killing too many people inside the river. The Trojans are fleeing into the river. Achilles pursues them into the river. Yeah, I mean, sounds like Achilles is in the river, and then the river can personify itself in like a human shape, which it sounds like it does sometimes, but sometimes it just rises up like a wave and tries to drown Achilles. Achilles is in danger of getting swept away by the river, but he grabs this huge tree off the river banks, uses it to dam up the river, but then as he's trying to escape, the river sounds it's a little bit confusing in this translation exactly what's happening. It sounds like the river just comes out of its banks to flood the whole area and try and drown Achilles. He calls out for help from the gods. Vulcan and I think Juno come down. Sorry, this translation that I'm reading uses the Roman names for the gods, so you'll have to excuse me. Um, and the Vulcan ends up defeating the river by setting a bunch of fires around the river, which I thought that doesn't sound right. The water should be able to beat fire, right? I was a little bit I thought it was a little bit strange that the fire was beating the water, but I guess the idea is he's making it so hot around the river that the river is starting to simmer and boil. So the river calls for mercy, and they put the fires out. But then there was a section. This is another one of those things I had completely forgotten about from the last time I read this book. The gods just start fighting each other. Now, the gods have been in conflict all throughout this book, but they've been using the humans as proxies so far. Like Athena has coached Diomedes on how to fight Ares. Sorry, I'm switching back and forth between the Greek and Roman names again. This translation uses the Roman names. Minerva has coached Diomedes on how to fight Mars, but she hasn't actually come to blows with Mars herself. But then in this chapter, they just start fighting among themselves. So, yeah, Mars, piercer of shields, opened the battle. Sword in hang, he sprang at once upon Minerva and reviled her. Why, vixen, he said, have you again set the gods by the ears in the pride and haughtiness of your heart? Have you forgotten how you set Diomedes, son of Titus, on to wound me, and yourself took visible spear and drove it into me to the hurt of my fair body? You shall now suffer for what you then did to me. As he spoke, he struck her on the terrible tasseled aegis. I think that's a part of the helmet, right? So terrible that not even Jove's lightning pierce it. Here did murderous Mars strike her with his great shield. She then drew back and with her strong hand seized a stone that was lying on the plain, great and rugged and black, which men of old had set for the boundary of a field. With this she struck Mars on the neck and brought him down. 9 roods, I don't know what a rood is, but 9 roods did he cover in his fall, and his hair was all soiled in the dust, while his armor rang rattling around him. And then they all just set upon each other. So Venus tries to help Mars. Minerva goes after Venus. Neptune taunts Apollo, but Apollo doesn't fight him. Then Diana comes, Apollo's sister, and then who beats up Diana? Oh, Juno. Juno beats up Diana. Interesting section there where the gods are directly fighting each other that I had completely forgotten about. Then chapter 22, the death of Hector. So, I don't really have that much intelligent to say about the death of Hector. I mean, this is one of the scenes of the Iliad that's so iconic. I think everybody remembers it clearly enough. I've forgotten really how pathetic it was, or how sad it was with Hector's parents pleading with him from the wall, not to go out and fight Achilles. Hector's mother points to her breast. So Hector's mother, she cried, weeping bitterly the while, Hector, my son, spurn not this breast, but have pity upon me too. If I have ever given you comfort from my own bosom, think on it now, my dear son, and come within the wall to protect us from this man. Stand not without to meet him. But Hector goes out and meets his doom against Achilles. And then I'm right in the middle of chapter 23, the funeral of. I think I pronounced this Patroclus previously. I was rewatching some of Steve Donahue's videos on the Iliad, and I think I'm supposed to be pronouncing it Patroclus. Patroclus, yeah. I read this book way back in the 1990s, before there was in the early 90s, before there was an internet or YouTube or anything like that. So I've learned all these pronunciations just from what 7th grade me approximated from the spelling. I'm sure people on BookTube can relate to learning the pronunciation wrong because you only saw it written down. And that's my reading for this week. I had made a promise, well, not so much a promise, but an aspiration last week that I was going to start getting back into some of the other books that I stopped reading during my busy period. Herodotus, the Bible, the grammar book, and also the Vietnamese book I left over there. I didn't make any progress on those, so I'm going to try and get those going this week. I'm not sure how much of those I'm going to read, but just try and get them back in rotation. And then, if you've been watching this channel this week, you know I've been doing a lot of Tintin books. Now these three I haven't talked about on the channel yet, because the ones I've reviewed on the channel I've returned to the library already. I started getting them out in blocks of 3, just to make sure that nobody checked out the books while I was trying to read them through in order. I don't think anyone else is currently reading the Tintin books out of the library except me, but trying to read them in order, I've discovered there's a continuity, chronology between the Tintin books. But while I was going through the library, I also discovered that our library is missing 2 volumes. So once I finish these 3, there's going to be a little bit of a gap. There will be 2 gaps, missing the Shooting Star and Red Rackham's Treasure. Well, what can you do? You try and do them in order as much as you can. And then when you get to a spot where you can't, you just have to miss them sometimes. But yeah, I've been making good progress on the Tintin books, in part because at night, while my wife is busy getting the 3-year-old to go to bed, I have to play with the baby. And I've discovered that the baby likes looking at these books. So I will hold the book up and read it to the baby. And that will be my way of looking after the baby and also getting reading done. So there have been a couple of long evenings where I had to spend like an hour or so with the baby and just finished off a whole Tintin book in that time. So that's one of the reasons I've been getting so many of them done. How many did I review this past week? I think 3 this past week. So, I mean, they are comic books and easy to read, but I have been getting through a lot of them. All right, and that's my week. I'll link to all the videos from this past week. I think just the Tintin videos in the description down below. And I will see you later, BookTube.